Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Miss Sayé show. In honor of the Women History Month, we have the beautiful Cooney with us. She's a woman leader. She's an archaeologist, accomplished author, and currently she's teaching classes at UCLA via Zoom. Welcome to the show, Cara. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. I have so many questions from you. You are so intriguing. You had also your own show on Discovery Channel. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That was now more than 10 years ago. We aired that in 2009 and shot it in 2008. It's called Out of Egypt, and now I think you can find all the episodes on
Yes.
YouTube. But it was great fun. So I started a research question in Egypt, and then I went to 8 to 10 different countries per episode to try to solve it. And really, it was like a second PhD for me. It was great fun shooting that show.
That is incredible. And how did they find you to come on the show and lead the show?
I pitched it, and I pitched it with my ex. So he's like, we should do this show called The Traveling Egyptologist, and there it came to be. It came to be called Out of Egypt, and we did all kinds of traveling, and it's so funny. I had my son the year after that show aired, and then I was like, I never want to get on a plane again, and I seem to have gotten all of the traveling out of my system, which was useful.
Incredible. So another example, and thank you for being on the show. You're so perfect for the Women History Month. You basically a trailblazer. You went and pitched the show to Discovery. So it wasn't that Discovery had the show and they came and found you. So that
Yeah.
is incredible. What drew you to Egypt? Why? How did you become so fascinated with that to invest so much of your energy and your time into it?
It's a question that one Egyptologist would never ask another Egyptologist because we know there is no answer. And it's the same reason that you're drawn to anything that you love. And people are like, why do you care about that so much? And you have no answer. I don't know why, but I see the issues and problems of the world around me, political problems, gender problems,
Sure.
power issues, better through the lens of ancient Egypt. And for whatever reason, when I study it in the ancient world and then I apply it back to where and when we live today, I can see it more clearly. And so it's just this weird, cracked, crazy thing about me where I just need to go back in the past. I do not know why. My mother would love to know the answer to that question.
Well, it seems like you have followed your passion. At least we know that. I certainly cannot say you didn't go to that field because you wanted to be rich and famous.
No, no, I did not.
So at least we know you have followed your heart and your passion, and that's why you're so successful in your area of work. One of my favorite books, you know what? Which one I'm going to talk about? When Women Ruled the World. That book is incredible, and I think it's such an inspiration, and I would suggest it for every woman and every little girl and everybody, but for little girls to just read that and know how state of Egypt millennia before us, they embraced women as rulers. So I would love for you to talk about that book a little bit.
Yes, so I wrote this book, When Women Ruled the World, based on a class that I have been teaching at UCLA for some years. At that point, I'd been teaching it for like 4 years. So I thought, okay, now's the time to buckle down and see if we can put all of these ideas into text. And I focused on 6 different women,
Right.
5 of whom became nothing less than king. People say, why do you use the word female king? Why do you use that phrase? Just call them queen. And I say, for the Egyptians, the word queen denotes no power. It is just a helpmate or sexual partner of the king. It means nothing else. And they use the word king, so I will use the word king. And we're talking about Merneith, Neferu Sobek, Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, Tawasret, and Cleopatra. Each of them has an extraordinarily different story. It goes from the very beginnings, the first dynasty Egypt, all the way to the bitter end, the last Ptolemaic dynasty of Cleopatra. That female power line follows it through. Egypt needed that female power. It seems to have been the other side of the kingship coin. And these women were there to prop up regimes, to make sure that an authoritarian, very unequal system of power based on family power was followed through, making sure their sons made it to the throne if they had them, or if there was a problem with the line, that the woman would step in as a representative of the family and keep everything in control. So it's in some ways a beautiful thing to see that women can rule, and that this is they are role models for us. We can look to Hatshepsut or Cleopatra and say, this is a role model for me. But on the other side of the coin, it is a tragedy too, because the most successful of those women, their stories were erased. How many of us know how to pronounce the name Hatshepsut, right? I had problems right there. And Cleopatra, we all remember, because she's remembered as a failure, as somebody who did not leave Egypt, but she found it. And that's why I would argue Shakespeare writes plays about her and not about Hatshepsut. Yeah.
Lovely. Oh my God, I get goosebumps when you talk about these things. It just gets me so excited because it taps into the potential that we have not here in US. We have not even touched it because it's all this potential is available to us, and yet we are not embracing it. This is a very interesting thing you told me. The reason we know Cleopatra, perhaps it's because the failure versus Hatshepsut, they try to, if maybe I'm wrong, erase what she has done by removing her from all the tomb, and like her face was removed because the king after her, they did not want to say, okay, well, she has done all these things. She has built all this beautiful architecture. So this is very interesting that you share that with us. I love Hatshepsut myself, and I have watched many things on her and many other queens. Why do you think back millennia, like before us, Egypt was able to embrace that? What was those stars that were aligned that we don't currently have?
Yeah, it took me a long while to puzzle it through. And in my class, I compare Egypt to many other ancient cultures. We have a week on the Levant and Mesopotamia, Persia, China, Rome, and Greece. And I compare Egypt. What makes Egypt different compared to other parts of the ancient world? And here's where it gets a little tricky again, and not necessarily the story we would like to hear, but think of Rome or Greece, where you don't have traditional kingships and rule by one dynastic family, and there's much more competition amongst the men. That actually means that women have a much, much harder time finding their way into politics, because when one man falls, another man fills his place, and the women are just stuck at home having babies and forget about it. They don't get to do anything. But in the more unequal societies, those more authoritarian kingships around the world, particularly ancient Egypt, which was the kingship, the divine kingship par excellence, when something happens to the king, say he's too young to rule, the older king dies unexpectedly, a new king comes to the throne, they don't expect it. In any other place in the world that was more competitive, if you try to put a 10-year-old on the throne, he's going to be dead before the week is out. And the guy who did it will hold the bloody knife and say, ha ha, I killed the king and now I'm king. And everyone say, you are. But in Egypt, where they believed so fervently in this divine kingship, if there was any sort of stress or problem with the divine succession and there was a boy on the throne, they would let him stay. The murders are very few. We have very little information about this. And who would they have make the decisions on his behalf? I have a 10-year-old right now, my beautiful 10-year-old boy. I'm not letting him make decisions in my household, let alone all of a country, right? So in Egypt, they knew that the regent, the decision maker, was better as a woman, because that woman was less likely to be a power grabber. So dozens and dozens of times documented, mothers are serving as the decision maker for their sons. When their sons are old enough, they then retreat back into the shadows and they say, okay, go ahead, my son, it's yours now. But 5 times those women who were put into that position of power because there was some sort of succession problem ended up becoming nothing less than king. So how ironic that the means of maintaining a highly authoritarian, highly unequal system was the very thing that got women into power. So it's,
Thank you for explaining it so simple so I could even understand. Yes, I understand that women were also ready, because as you said, they would come to play to solve a problem. For example, if the king was too young, okay, the mother, if they sometimes have to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just because I follow your books and that's where I gain my knowledge. Or when the brother needed a wife and they wanted to keep it in the family, the sister would step in and they would be husband and wife. But at the same time, they could have birth issues and the next king will have problems. And then again, a woman would step in and solve that problem, which is very interesting. As you said, that malfunction actually allowed women to come and shine. And it was also very interesting to me, the word king and queen that you just described, and how one of the queens, she invented herself as a king. Like they say she died, but she really didn't, but she came back as a pharaoh because pharaohs were respected and more celebrated. Is that correct?
I think you're thinking of Nefertiti, who we think of as just the most beautiful face. You can see her in your mind's eye, that beautiful face of Nefertiti, that bust of hers that's in the Berlin Egyptologist Museum. And Nefertiti, it used to be thought that she had disappeared in year 12 of Akhenaten and that she just died, she's gone, as you say. Mm. And instead, it seems that she was a co-king with a different name. And then after that she may even have been king in her own right, alone, without her husband next to her on the throne, in an even different name. So she's got to take these different names going forward. And I think any woman who has stepped into the halls of power knows what this means. You have to put on your pantsuit. You have to put on your shoulder pads. You have to put on your blocky heels. You put on your glasses, put your hair back. You can't be too sexy. And this is a way of stepping into a masculine hall of power. Nefertiti changed her name. She even changed her name to masculinize herself. Yeah.
What did she change her name to?
It's quite complicated. So when she became the chief queen of Akhenaten, and he changed his name. He changed her name to Neferuaten Nefertiti. Quite a mouthful. Then, when she became co-king, there's an Ankh-Khepru-Re Neferuaten, who is a king alongside Akhenaten. And then after that, there is an Ankh-Khepru-Re Smenkhare, who was sole king. I can't believe I just pulled that out and was able to say all of those names, because it's quite complicated, this history and these long names.
Well, that is incredible. I love how you made the reference to our modern time. A woman who's going, to be the king of our time. They put the shoulder pads, they put the blocky heel, they put the glasses, they pull the hair back because they want to be taken more seriously. Unfortunately, a little bit sex appeal may come across and get translated differently. So I completely understand that. And it's incredible that how you made that to our day and age right now. Which I would like for you to elaborate on what is happening right now. For example, during this election, what is it that you're happy about? What do you think that is demonstrating, and what do you think that we see change, that is a positive change?
This is the most massive question you could possibly ask me, and I'll hit it on two fronts, and you interrupt me at any time. Number one, I think we are asking ourselves how racism works, and that racism isn't about an individual feeling racist thoughts, though that is part of it, but it is about a system that disallows people from entering certain schools, having certain jobs, and having certain opportunities, even buying houses or shopping unaccosted without being accused of shoplifting. That systemic racism is something we are now looking at in the United States with much more open eyes than we did before. And this is destabilizing people quite severely. People who worked hard, who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, who came here as immigrants. And I'm a product of immigration in the United States myself. And they say, what do you mean? I don't have privilege. How can you say that? And so there's a lot of push and pull between what it means to be privileged. Right. And I think for the first time, we're seeing that the United States is founded on two things. One, a manifest destiny that takes lands away from the indigenous people who were here before and just takes it, moves the people away. in whatever way. And that richness is something that we have benefited from until we get to California, where I sit now. There's no more land left, and we run out of space. We have to come up with different options. And number two, this country was based on chattel slavery, on the labor of Black bodies that worked for our benefit and were not paid for it. And we are now seeing what that has wrought. It's not that old. I'm an Egyptologist. I study masses of time that work in the millennia. And our country is 250 years old and chattel slavery is 400 years old. That's a blip on the time spectrum of how nations work and how human beings build systems. So when I look at the origins of our country, I see the inequalities and I see that karma, if you like, working its way out today and everyone having this discussion.
Sure.
Now, the second thing in the midst of all of this is that we are having a discussion about what it means to be women in power, why we are hostile to it, why it seems to be something that's so scary, and why things are suddenly changing so fast. I mean, you've noticed everyone is freaking out, right? Everyone around us is freaking out, right and left. People are freaking out about all these people deciding they can come out as gay, about people discussing and becoming transgender, about women deciding not to get married. Think of all of the first generation families in the United States who are like saying to their daughters, I'm sorry, you're not going to get married? Where are the children? What is happening? Because there is all of this choice now about sexuality and then what you do with it, about getting married or not, having kids or not. And the amount of freedom that is being given to people that did not previously have that freedom is so destabilizing that I think it's nothing less than the destabilization of the patriarchy itself, the rule of the fathers, the rule by the few men. And that is so upsetting to people that what do you see on your social media? What do you see in front of the Capitol building? But angry men who have had the privilege of power, who see that they're losing it and are very, very angry about that possibility or that reality. And that is the discourse that we are happening. Sometimes it can be very angry. Sometimes people can be calmer about it. But in my historian's view, I try to take a long approach to see what we're going through.
Thank you for explaining that beautifully. From the eye of a historian, Republican, Democrat, liberal, whatever. How do you feel about someone like Kamala Harris rising to become the vice president?
Kamala Harris is so very interesting because you don't see the amount of hate and vitriol that's functioning against her as you did against Hillary Clinton. And I've been thinking about this a lot. And again, wherever you fit on the spectrum, doesn't matter, right, left, in the middle. I think we can all agree that the continued vitriol against Hillary Clinton is still quite workable on the human mind, that you can foment that hate and people are like, oh my God, Hillary, that witch, that horrible woman. And people believe that she's in charge of some pedophile cabal. And people do actually believe this because their intent and will to hate her is so great. Now, interesting, there is hate against Kamala Harris, misogyny, if you like, but it doesn't take the same form and it's not as powerful upon human minds. It doesn't seem to catch fire as much as it did with Hillary Clinton. And I'm like, why is that? What is it about? Kamala Harris is a woman of color. She's part Black American and part Indian American.
Yes.
You know, why would we, Hillary's white, she's part of the upper caste, right? Yes. Why would we be more inclined to think of Hillary as the witch and not Kamala? Notice how we use first names, right? For both of these women, as if we can own them and talk about them in that way. I think that Kamala Harris is less useful as a foil of patriarchal fear because she is not from a dynasty, number one. Hillary was connected to Bill. She's connected to that political side of things. Kamala is her own prime mover, her own disconnected person. Number two, she doesn't have children. And so she's not creating a lineage. How many of the women in my book, how many of the women who have taken power as abbesses, as Vestal virgins, have had to give up their sexuality and say, I'm not going to have kids. so that they could have that power. This is an exchange we human beings make in patriarchal systems.
Mm-hmm.
If women have power, we often assume that they are going to push that power to their children, that Chelsea is going to become powerful, that Bill's going to get all this stuff. Kamala got married late. She never had children. And it seems that because of that, in our simple patriarchal minds, she's less compromised or compromisable. And so she's less hated, or the hate that people try to foment against her doesn't catch fire as quickly. These are my thoughts so far, but I'm very curious what other people have to say, if there's any ideas about why this is. But it's a very interesting question.
That is a very interesting answer and a very interesting analysis that you had, that Kamala comes across as a less of a threat because even if you don't like her, that's okay because there's no one she's going to pass it on to. But you know, that what made people think. I personally very happy that we have a female vice president for once. That is, to me, a progress of some kind. And again, we are catching up with ancient Egypt, this seems, in the year of 2021. Or we're trying to catch up. We're not catching up, but we are going towards that direction. So to me, that as a woman, I'm happy about that part of it. I'm like, okay, progress. We can see that, because what you see is sometimes what you start believing, what we see on television. As an actress, as a filmmaker, I take it very seriously, the roles that are assigned. If we keep seeing a police officer, male police officer, male police officer, male surgeon, then the 6-year-old who's watching the TV, she's going to think, okay, well, I cannot be a surgeon, but I can be a nurse. You know, that type of thing. So the more we see it, the more we believe it, the more it normalize it, and we can have more of it. So I'm personally excited for that. And speaking of Hillary Clinton and Chelsea, I have been reading this book, Gutsy Woman. I don't know if you have heard of it.
I don't, but I'd love to see the recommendation.
I very much enjoy it. It talks about all the women in the history that they have not been celebrated or talked about much in different areas. We can they're talking about Kamala Yousafzai, who's from currently, you know, she has an initiative, and I think I said her first name incorrectly, Yousafzai, the Afghan woman. And then they go back to Hatshepsut and other female who paved the road. So I very much enjoyed that book because it's dedicated to all the women who have done something important, who have not been celebrated. And I was thinking how awesome that would be if something like that was taught in our schools. So it won't be just talked about men who have done things. So Gutsy Woman, I really like it. I recommend it. I'm still reading it and rereading it and researching each woman that they're talking about. Another question that I have for you, why do you think, and how could we change it, that when a woman in our Western society expresses eagerness and passion for success, it's suppressed, it's come across as negative? However, if a man has the same passion and same expresses that or display that, it's rewarded. And it's like, wow, this is like courage, or it's translated positively. Why do you think we have that? And how could we make that better, balanced?
Such a complicated question, because you're asking why women are blamed for their ambitions. And of course we know they are. That at UCLA, when they do student evaluations, a female who has the same expectations as a male professor is often seen as bossy or shrill or difficult. And he's firm, and you know, this patriarchy works upon our minds in all kinds of interesting ways. I think that power and money are so interconnected that they work on us in very weird ways. Let me tell you let me give you an example. So do you know what the percentage is of women who are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in the United States?
No, do tell me, please.
It's about 6%. So it's extraordinarily low, and it's in the single digits. And those are the scarce resources of the United States. Where is our great wealth? it's in our stock markets, and it's in our companies. And if women aren't in charge of them, then whenever they speak up to have ambition, the understanding is that they're going to destabilize a system that has already reached an agreed upon balance. So I think that as women are placed more into these positions, and as we trust to have women in these positions, but as women themselves show up on the list of the world's richest people as billionaire, whoever, they need to show up on that list too. Otherwise, the way we see the women is the way we see Cleopatra. We see them as conniving. We see them as lying. We see them as duplicitous. Because they don't have direct access to the scarce resources, the way that we expect women to get them is through flirtation or through sexuality or through manipulation or whatever. And so a woman's ambition, even if expressed very directly and outright, is very often seen as highly destabilizing and problematic and even immoral. That a woman is not supposed to have these feelings. That's the understanding. And a woman is supposed to be in a certain place. All of this is quickly changing within the next generation, where women are out earning college degrees over men, where women sit better in a classroom than my 10-year-old son can sit in a classroom and listen. And women are becoming breadwinners of the family. They're deciding not to get married. They're deciding not to put themselves under the thumb of another man. As these decisions on the grassroots spread, women are now in control of more and more scarce resources. That's got to move up. And we need to see women in control of scarce resources at the very top. And when we do, then we won't, I hope, see the same kind of demonization of a woman's ambition.
Thank you so much. I have a question about one of the queens that I have been interested in. She has not made it to your short list of book, but I've been interested in her and I'm trying to learn more. I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, but Queen Taye, Taye.
So it's Tia that you're asking me about.
Tia.
And she's an 18th dynasty great royal wife of Amenhotep III, a very, very powerful woman. Yes. And there are images of her that show her as a young, beautiful woman, perfect of body. And there are images of her that display her with a more drawn and mature face. And she lived into the reign of her son Akhenaten, moved with him to his new capital, and was, from what we can see, an important matriarch within his court. What she thought of all of the crazy decisions that he was making about Egyptian religion, we can only imagine. But she was there as a very strong supporter of her son.
But also wasn't a royal family. She was, if I'm correct, she was the daughter of a wealthy man. Then she got married into the royal family or the king. Or
you're exactly right, because her parents were known as Yuya and Tuyu, and their tomb is in the Valley of the Kings. The king gave her parents the privilege of burial in the royal valley itself. And she came from non-royal stock. She is not a sister of the king. You mentioned incest earlier, which is another really intriguing topic. And it's quite interesting that incest peaks when female power is strongest in ancient Egypt. That means that the daughters of the king who are able to find power through the men around them, through their brothers, through their fathers, are the most likely to be able to launch themselves into kingship itself. And so most of the women of the 5 who became king are connected to systems of incest in some way. It's just, I mean, it's upsetting for us. We think of the problems that would happen genetically with that kind of coupling or pairing. But in terms of human reactions and trying to keep power in the family, it's a very effective strategy. And Europeans engaged in it quite a bit too. Ancient Persian kings engaged in incest as well. And it's just a means of making sure that you keep the power within, but it also gives women quite a great deal of political power.
I would love to see more movies on the different queens. As you said, we know Cleopatra. And another reason that we know Cleopatra really well, because there's so many movies of Cleopatra. So if there are more movies of Hatshepsut, then we would know more about Hatshepsut. So I would love to be in a position to bring that to the screen, and in a documentary form or even in a live action form, because I just think these stories must be told. And they're inspiring. And it makes us certainly feel we're behind. So it inspires you to catch up a little bit more. Do you think what Cleopatra did, or how part of, not this is not all she did, she has done a lot, but do you think that the mischievous and that sexuality that she used, it was form of diplomacy that she was using? That was her form of doing it?
Cleopatra is the one who acts the most like a man in the entire book. And you could argue that she uses two men as a kind of harem over the long term, her own reverse harem, a
Right.
kind of set of sperm donors, if you will. She marries neither of them. She gives neither of them formal power. She keeps the power, she and her son, and her other children with Mark Antony. So, the way that the ancient Romans went after Cleopatra and their writings about her, their propaganda, in my opinion, and in my chapter that I write about Cleopatra in the book When Women Ruled the World, I throw out those Roman sources almost entirely. And I try to tell her story from the Egyptian perspective of how she would be seen by the ancient Egyptians. What's she doing? Why is she pairing up with these men? Why is she creating children with these men? How is this working from the Egyptian perspective? And Cleopatra knew that of all of the great women who ruled before her, those who ruled for longer than a couple of years did not rule without a male accompaniment by her side. She knew she needed male protection. And she went out there into a newly globalized Mediterranean world. And she found that protection. She found the strongest warlords that there were. Julius Caesar came to her, and then Mark Antony, and she started writing letters. But these were effective pairings for her that worked to keep the Roman Empire from invading. Now, it didn't work out in the end, right? Because the Roman Empire does, in fact, invade and take Egypt, and it becomes a mere province. But one could argue that Cleopatra was also sucked into a larger civil war that she could not control. And in many ways, she backed the wrong horse. Mark Antony was so ambitious that he invaded Central Asia. He invaded Parthia, the land of ancient Persia. It was devastating, a huge loss for him. And he came back to Egypt limping and hoping Cleopatra would help pick him up. A successful invasion of Armenia was not enough to turn him around. And it was all but written when he went into the Battle of Actium and lost there against Octavian. So one could ask, if Cleopatra hadn't linked herself to such an ambitious warlord, perhaps she and her family could have held on a little bit longer. But then you ask, if she hadn't linked herself to such an ambitious warlord, maybe they would have come in and taken Egypt before that. So
yes,
yeah, but she was between a rock and a hard place, and did the best that she could, I think, with the tools that she was given.
that is incredible. Maybe one day you and I can join forces and make more films on different queens so people can know more about it. This has been inspiring conversation. I have been really excited to have you on the show. It's not enough. I can listen to you for days and days, and it won't be enough. The wealth of knowledge that you have. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I hope you come back on the show again so we can hear from you. But thank you again for coming to the show, Cara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank
I
you.
am grateful for you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and see you guys next Saturday.